Well, welcome back to Destination-Aviation, your one-stop shop for everything that I want to gripe about, bitch about, complain about, talk about. No, this is your host here, Jeff, back to discuss some of the topics happening in aviation. Hi to Frankfurt, Germany. It appears that we have a lot of downloads happening in Frankfurt, Germany. I think I've mentioned this before in a podcast before because I have the distinct memory of thinking about David Hasselhoff and making some dumbass remark towards him and Frankfurt, Germany. But welcome, listeners from across the globe. Glad that everybody's tuning in to hear some of their most favorite aviation stories and regales and whatever other things that people say. No, but welcome back. It is chilly here in Illinois. It's about 40 degrees or so. I talked to my family. My brother actually is now a retired air traffic controller, and he's been cruising the countryside in his RV. So it's kind of like a family trip. But last I checked in with him, he was in Mississippi. I actually had a job offer in Mississippi. I don't get a ton of job offers, but yeah, that is one spot that I had one. It was, I forget the airport's name, but it's right there down by I think it's St. Louis Bay or Bay of St. Louis or Louis St. Bay, something like that. Looked like a nice area. As you know, I think Mississippi is the cheapest state in the United States to live. I think they also have the lowest medium income, but it's also the cheapest. I used to know somebody that when their brother drove through Mississippi, he got a $20 speeding ticket, and he said, "That's it?" And the cop said, "Yep." He goes, "Well, write me up again." I don't know how well that went. I don't think he spent much time in Mississippi after that, but it's a nice spot. It's actually funny. My father and I had lunch once in Mississippi at a Cracker Barrel, and those little games there, I forget what they're called, but they're the T squares. T square. See, this is probably why I didn't succeed in life. You might be right once I tell you the story. But they have this triangle game and it has golf tees in it. And the object of the game is to jump the golf tees until you're down to one. He couldn't do it. We couldn't do it. And he said at that point, "Nobody at this table is going to do any better than me." But you know what? Look at this. I got this podcast with, wow, 30 of my best friends in Frankfurt listening. But I'm glad that you're here and I'm glad that you're rambling. And a lot of things happening in aviation. When is there not? If you saw Elon's Musk big splash, he was down there with Trump to watch it take off. It's interesting if you look around online, if you're a conspiracy theory person, there's been conspiracies running around that actually wasn't Donald Trump at the launch, but it was one of his body doubles. But who knows? Like I said, I'm not a conspiracy guy. I also, though, I'm sure, and I don't think, I'm sure there's stuff that isn't the truth, but who knows? I don't know. I look at the pictures yourself and decide yourself. It was more cool to see the rocket. I know they went through and toured some of the factories and the development of that. I actually know the person that runs the Brownsville airport. And he seems excited. I know he's one of those guys that never seems to get excited. Just kind of even keeled, straight lace, and just stares. And it sure is nice that we have these rockets taking off. They will be great for the GDP down here. But he's a nice enough guy. Just a little bit, like I said, a little bit stiff. Whoa, my phone's pinging. How rude of me to not have shut my phone off. Maybe I should check that and come back. We'll readjust here. I'll get back into whatever I was talking about. Stuff back. Sorry, my phone, very important text message though. So check it in, making sure that things are well. And they look like they are. But no, I just got this in over the wire from the Civil Air Patrol that one of their 182s crashed in Lemire County, Colorado, participating in a search and rescue training exercise. One survivor and two fatalities. That's horrible. My brother, he was going to be a Civil Air Patrol member, but the branch, I don't know if they're branches or what they call the one that they showed up to, they didn't actually have an airplane, so most of their study guide revolved around push-ups versus push-ups and flying, so he decided not to go, but I know the Civil Air Patrol. I let them use our offices currently. They have a good team there. They look for the emergency locator transmitters. We talked a little bit about that before in some of our episodes. If you remember, the aircraft that disappeared in Alaska. If you haven't, it's in the list. Go back and listen to it. But it disappeared, and then it was right during that year. I think it was in 1972 or 73. Maybe I should go back and listen to the episode. But the emergency locator transmitter is a beacon that goes off when an aircraft crashes, and the Civil Air Patrol looks for that. In this case, that was the congressman that went missing, and that's when Representative Don Young took over. But actually, we should talk about that because there's been some developments. Not in the missing aircraft. If you go back and listen to the episode, you'll remember the aircraft was never found. It disappeared while traveling through the Alaska side. I believe it was a Cessna 310. I think we speculated certain things like icing issues, etc. But yes, so there is an update on that front. So if you remember right from the episode, at the time, Representative Begich, he was traveling on that 310 that disappeared. He was the lone and only representative from the state of Alaska. Most people on here know, but if you don't, I'm assuming, I'll just tell you. The House of Representatives for the United States, they're based off of population base for the state which the representative is located. So Alaska being one of the largest states in the United States, taking up half the continental U.S. if it were to sit in the lower 48, has only one U.S. representative. So Representative Young, we talked about this because this was in another episode. There are things like earmarks that congressional members can give out for all sorts of things, one of them being aviation. But those were a big thing back then. Representative Young, he built a bridge to nowhere, which is what killed the earmarks for a while. Then they brought him back. Representative Young was one of the oldest members of Congress, passed away, I think, last year. Special election, the first indigenous person of Alaska was elected to that seat. But Young, Representative Young, admitted back in the day, in the 70s, the only reason why he got that seat is because Begich went missing in the aircraft. So they're all kind of tied and interwoven into aviation, or as Donald Trump likes to say, I just did the weave. We put a weave together there of past stories. You can go listen to them to line it all up. But you had a representative who passed away in a plane crash, and then one who took over, who spent pork barrels and ruined earmarks for a while when it comes to congressional spending. They brought congressional spending back. That representative passed away from old age. First indigenous person of Alaska is elected, and then as part of the new wave, or I should say red wave. New wave was the 80s, but red wave, which also counted too, right? New wave, red wave, they're all part of that Reagan administration era where there was a red wave definitely back in 1984. The only state Walter Mondale did not win was Minnesota. The rest went to Ronald Reagan. So talk about a red wave. But in this case, the representative's son, who passed away in the aircraft, disappeared, or excuse me, I say grandson, Nick Begich, he beat Mary Patola, who was Alaska's only House seat member. So he beat her in the actual election, which added to the red wave. And Mary's husband, if you remember from a past episode, he actually died in a plane crash last year. Her husband was a bush pilot in Alaska, and his aircraft went down after dropping off some hunters. In another past episode, go listen to it. But this House seat seems to be specifically tied to aviation in not the best ways sometimes. But, I try to be non-partisan on this channel, so much success to Nick Begich and his newly elected seat that his grandfather held. So that is kind of one of those, again, weaves back to other stories that we've talked about in the past. I don't know if anybody saw, but a Southwest 737, like there's any other Southwest, right? We've talked about this quite a bit on this channel, but the Southwest 737 took off at a Dallas Love Field and was shot multiple times. It was going to Indianapolis. It hit the tail of the aircraft. Nobody was injured in it, but I think they're investigating, obviously, this incident. I don't know. Maybe it was one of our noise complainer friends that had enough and decided to shoot some stuff into the air. I don't know, but they're looking into it, and probably at some point, well, maybe we'll never get to the bottom of it, especially these random shootings, but they could probably pinpoint maybe where it was coming from. Plane spotters, no, plane shooters, unfortunately. And it happened too on a Spirit aircraft. Was going into, I'll look it up here. So it was en route to Santiago from Haiti, uh, and it received gunshot fire as well. I think there's been some unrest, obviously, we've seen in Haiti, so I'm not as surprised about that one. But then again, the other one happened in Texas, so how surprised should we be on that one? It's probably the question to ask. In both cases, nobody was hurt. But speaking of Spirit Airlines, bad news, Bear fares, bankruptcy. Got an email from the CEO of Spirit Airlines saying that, don't worry, all of my points that I've had before will exist into the future. So if you remember from podcasts back where we took Spirit Airlines into Aruba and we met our friend with his dumb pontoon boat idea, that airline filed for bankruptcy. I have some friends that fly for it. One is a failed dentist. He wanted to be a dentist and didn't end up doing that and went to be a pilot. So I don't know. I guess there's probably the same tableside manners, whether you're in the cockpit or you're in the back of the plane. Folks, this is your captain speaking, and make sure you floss and rinse and spit 3 times a day. I don't know about that spitting part. But pilots, they're interesting creatures. So, anyways, Spirit Airlines filed for bankruptcy. That will leave a lot of open vacuums for people that want to fart and blow their nose and put it in the seat back pockets in front of them. Who will they fly on now? I don't know. Maybe Frontier. I kid. Both those airlines are good. I've been on them. And I'll be honest, we've all been on multiple aircraft where people seem to pass gas. Don't know why, but it's enjoyable. I almost choked myself to death on a flight down to Nashville. The person next to me was farting so much. But, it is what it is. That's the majesty of flying. But, yeah, we will see our friends there. And, back to the Southwest, it sounds like the aggressive investor into that company, Elliott Investments, I believe, they were kind of a rogue or aggressive investor trying to basically take over the board or at least inflict some changes to it. CEO Bob Jordan is holding on. We got rid of the open boarding seating. We've talked about that. But it seems like Southwest is kind of holding firm now. It's surprising over the last 2 years, the deterioration that a brand can have. This is really the first time that I've seen it in this magnitude in my time in this industry, which is going on to 24 years. But everybody loves Southwest, and then it just imploded. Talked about it before, so hopefully they'll get their stuff back together. I think Southwest claim to fame is something like 83% of the domestic seats in the United States they end up flying, but it is interesting. Keep our airlines healthy. We all want to fly. We probably saw with the Alaska and Hawaiian airline merger, now that it's been approved, they're dropping their Austin flight from Austin, Texas. It's something that they've said they don't want to commit to through the merger. So it's interesting. I don't know. I used to know the person that was at the Austin airport. She got hired there during COVID. And then she ended up, I think, living in North Carolina most of the time, never moved there. And then they made some changes in Austin anyway. So it's a city-run airport. It's a big airport. It's been growing by leaps and bounds, mostly, because of the city. Usually that's what you see now, especially in a origin and destination market like Austin. It's kind of like, what's the secret? And I've known some people that have worked there and they're like, oh yeah, we know what we're doing and blah, blah, blah. And I'm not saying that they don't. They seem like they do. But, when you have a population explosion, it's no mystery why there's more flights and people going through your airport. It's maybe not necessarily anything that you're doing, but you just happen to be within the market that's growing. So, kudos to them. But some of them have been fired recently. So when you get into those city-run organizations, a lot of times people get onto their thoughts of what they want to see that airport look like or what they're doing. And in this case, Yeah, it's going to a lot of changes are happening there, which, I'm going to get on this gripe a little bit because of my background and some of the things I look into. And, one of the things that has been a major issue for me is general aviation airports. There's a target on general aviation from a lot of different angles. Some of it can be based off of environmental. Some of it's based off of people that have bought homes around an airport and don't want it to exist any longer. So, things like noise or flying over. The first airport I work at, Manistee, Michigan, I was watching their board meetings. Yes, dork alert. I listen to people's board meetings. But there was a woman in there who was complaining about airplane rides. And now this is a small tourist town in Michigan. And when you talk about tourist airplane attraction rides, you're probably, when I was there, and I can't imagine it's grown much since then because the population is still pretty low, even in the summer months. Maybe if you're lucky, 7 or 8 airplanes a day. And, for maybe 30 or 40 seconds going over your home. Well, she was there complaining, as most, I have a right to my property, but it's like, well, it's kind of the same as like living next to a highway. The guy that's Jake braking on the highway, you can't pinpoint, but in aviation, you can. So in this case, the poor airport manager had to sit there and listen to how it's completely devastating to have 8 aircraft go over her house, in 30 or 45-second intervals throughout a 24-hour period. It's unsustainable. It's not livable, et cetera, et cetera. But general aviation airports get a big target on their back, airports in general. And so, even the Federal Aviation Administration, the way they fund general aviation airports through this last FAA reauthorization, which FAA reauthorization basically gives us as airports our ability to continue to operate for the next 5 years. When you talk about federal grants and programming of that money, so every 5 years they get to kind of tinker with how that looks. And by they, I mean Congress. And so they put a lot of things into there. So in this case, out of the general pot of money, we get $150,000 a year. That's what we're entitled. The rest of it is what they refer to as discretionary money. In our case, at our airport, we've been successful in discretionary funding. However, you're always dealing with someone's discretion. And so they might be with the FAA, they may be a state official, or both. So what you end up with is, usually like an airport like Miami-Dade or Orlando, they're going to be more successful because they have passenger service, American, United, where all these people are training these pilots and these mechanics. Those type of airports don't get funded as well. And so like in Miami or Orlando, they'll get, entitled 10, 20, $30 million or more. They could have $150 million project. At a general aviation small airport, you may be talking $2 or $3 million. There's more expensive projects, but most of it flows around that. But we're all guaranteed 150 grand, and on a commercial airport, it's based off how many passengers you have. So I always thought the formula was very weighted the wrong way. I think it would be fair to spread it out more evenly and allow airports that are general aviation based to really be an asset to the communities, can increase, the pilot training. We've all been on those flights where the crew doesn't exist or are late because somebody got sick, somebody left, and they don't have a replacement. So the more pilots you can get into the pipe stream, the more mechanics you can get in. We've all been on a maintenance delay. The better off for everybody. But we just went through this, and everybody told me, because in FAA reauthorization, general aviation airports and non-primary airports were to get from 20 to 25% of that total discretionary pot. So you're talking base of maybe $200 to $300 million in extra funding. But when you start talking to your administrators, oh, I don't know, I never heard about that. I don't think there is any extra money. So, it's just unfortunate because when you try to go get funds, you're really scraping at it and you're really trying to convince people why you should do things to your runway, to your taxiways, to your ramp spaces, to try to build hangars for people. Work with the private industry. It's a whole kind of mix of things there. But FAA reauthorization, in my opinion, did not go as far as it should have as to help. There was a lot of fanfare around a GA title in this filing, which there was from Representative Sam Graves, but nobody really wanted to get in and actually fix the problems that are happening with grants across the U.S. So we're still dealing with that. We're dealing with it as airport operators and within our communities, but and especially now with what's happened in Washington, really the thought that we're hearing is there will be a clawback of the majority in funds, but maybe in return, there might be an easing of restrictions, on airports. There's federal aviation regulation parts. So like 135 is charter operators. So the people that operate charter aircraft, they're looking at this as maybe an opportunity to reduce some of the regulation now that the Republicans have the House, the Senate, and the White House. So very interesting times indeed. We'll be curious to see how it continues to flow. Everything's kind of up in the air, including our new Secretary of Transportation, Sean Duffy. So if you didn't watch The Real World in 1998, you may not have seen Sean. He was on that in Rules, which is probably where part of his experience comes for the DOT. But he was I believe, a district attorney up in Wisconsin and a representative there. And he is Trump's pick for Department of Transportation secretary. It's funny, I was at a conference and I made a joke to a panel about who the next DOT secretary was going to be, and maybe we should just watch Fox and Friends. And then everybody laughed, and it was the running joke. But lo and behold, look, because Sean Duffy is also a Fox pundit. So, but, I'm hearing good things. I'm, looking forward to good things. The last 4 years have not been as rewarding for general aviation airports. There is a lot of different priorities from the Department of Transportation that, left our funding sources a little bit lacking. So, like I said, trying to be non-bipartisan and just look at the reality of who's in what seat, what we had before, what we have now, and try to figure out the best pathway forward for all of us to be successful, because these truly are community assets. And the more people we can get involved, the more people we can get flying, I think the better off for everybody. And, there's great careers in aviation now. You're talking 6-figure jobs. My brother, who I just talked about retiring, now his seat's open. I don't know if you want his seat, but his seat's there. But you're talking a 6-figure job. And the thing with being an air traffic controller now is you don't even have to have a college degree. You're talking a high school diploma and 3 years of employment experience. And employment experience could be working at McDonald's. Then they send you off to training in Oklahoma City, which it sounds like now they have some universities doing it. But what a great opportunity to get involved into a career field where you don't have to put any real money towards. And they have those postings that come up often. Anybody that's out there that's listening and that doesn't know, feel free to drop me a line at dapodcast85@gmail.com, and I can send you some references to usajobs.gov. When those advertisements do come out and available. They did say Michael Whittaker, who is the FAA administrator, wants to hire, I think, over 3,000 air traffic controllers this year. So you will be seeing those job postings come up. So if you've been cutting hair for 3 years, or you've been working at Walmart for 3 years, or you're an accountant and you're just tired of being an accountant and you want to be an air traffic controller, well, there's your opportunity. They're all over the place. So it is good. And like I said, my brother's seat's wide open. Just slide right in there and take over for him now that he's cruising the countryside in his RV, listening to this from points unknown. But when I see normal places like Frankfurt that listen to our channel, maybe I'll start to see something pop up like Biloxi, Mississippi. Maybe he's listening to me right now as we speak at a casino where hopefully he's up or down. I don't really know. I guess we'll find out what type of mood he's in if he calls me from somewhere from points unknown. He's basically like an Anthony Bourdain for the swamps of the United States as he traverses through Louisiana, Mississippi, Georgia, etc. But he seems to be enjoying his best life. So kudos to you, Dave, for wherever you are on the open road. Keep the shiny side up on that RV. So we did some ranting and raving there through a lot of the beginning of this episode. But as I said, I'm trying to touch on a few things and throw maybe a story in here. And we talked in the past about Leonard Skinner and that unfortunate incident. And one that I had not heard of before that I thought about sharing was because Reba McEntire didn't pass away in this plane accident, but a tragic story of her band did. So I want to read a little bit about this story of Reba McEntire's band that perished in an aircraft accident. So Reba McEntire, in 1991, played what turned out to be the final show with all the members of her band to the present date of that 1991 show. They were entertaining fans in San Diego on March 16th. And McEntire's tour manager, along with seven of the band members, were set to depart via airplane to the Fort Wayne airport, which, what we were just talking about, 135, I'm sure that's the type of operation that this was. We'll confirm here as we read this out. But, obviously flying from an airport like San Diego to Fort Wayne, there would be a direct commercial flight, so not getting on your United and American, so you're chartering an aircraft to go there. So it sounds like this. And, we talked a little bit about the Stevie Ray Vaughan death, and that was a helicopter that happened up north of here in Alpine Valley in Wisconsin, which I actually just went and saw Hootie and the Blowfish there. Great concert over the summer. And I know I'm doing another weave here, but I ran into somebody who got a cassette tape of Hootie and the Blowfish before they were Hootie and the Blowfish, maybe just the Blowfish. But no, they got a cassette tape because the drummer's local to the Chicago region, and they were driving a U-Haul and played it, and they're like, listen to this new band, and this is like, 88, 1989 period, and they're like, yeah, okay, great. And then Hootie and the Blowfish blew up in the 90s, so look at that. So they got a sneak peek into that. But when we talk about Alpine Valley, great spot to listen to a show. You remember in that case, Stevie Ray Vaughan was doing a show with Eric Clapton, and his helicopter crashed, but same thing, they were all kind of deciding who was going to get on the plane. Like when we talked about when the music died with Buddy Holly, it's always kind of this, who's getting on the plane, who's staying back. But they're set, in this case, Reba McEntire's band, to fly to Fort Wayne. McEntire and her husband at the time, Naval Blackstock, spent the night in San Diego, but were awakened by shocking news in the early morning. The plane transporting McEntire's manager and her board members crashed. When we were notified, we went down, met with our pilot, and he told us what happened. She recalled this during an interview with Oprah Winfrey years later. The singer was desperate to believe that everyone would be all right, but her husband admitted that their chances weren't great. The celebrity couple spent most of the night on the phone trying to figure out what happened, and eventually got the devastating news that there were no survivors. The accident occurred shortly after takeoff, and an investigation subsequently revealed that the crash was caused by the plane's wing grazing Otay Mountain. Investigators determined that the impact sighted the aircraft spinning out of control, leading to an eventual crash. The pilot didn't know the area well and was unaware the mountain was even in flight. Something the flight crew service specialist notably failed to convey to the pilot prior to takeoff. Roger Woosley, who was a co-owner of the company of the chartered aircraft, confirmed that the pilot asked if they could take off eastbound and stay at 3,000 feet. That was reported to, it's up to you. This is what flight service said. There's a mountain there, but he said it was okay. So this side of it is the pilot did exactly what flight service told him to do, and he flew right into the mountain. After the plane crashed, Reba McEntire said she didn't know if she would be able to continue going on, that her band meant everything to her. She said that it showed her how precious life was, and that by the grace of God and her faith, she realized that she had to go on with her music and that they were in a better place. Now, this is an aviation channel, so we're going to get a little bit further into the actual aircraft incident. Not much, because we're towards the end of the episode here. But looking at this, it was a Hawker Siddeley DH-125 1 Alpha 522. So a Hawker aircraft took off 1:40 a.m. from Brown Field Municipal Airport, which is located near the Mexico border. We talked about the 3,000 feet earlier in the article. After reaching altitude of 3,400 feet above sea level, the aircraft crashed on the side of Otay Mountain. Some similarities here again to different past episodes. We talked about the flying saucer. That was a scenario where at B-29 they were out looking, flew into the side of the mountain in Washington. So similar themes when we start talking about aviation accidents. The National Transportation Safety Board determined that the probable cause of the accident was related to improper pilot planning. And we heard before the owner of the charter operator blamed the flight service operator as well. So multiple blame to go around on all sides. It's interesting. So I know the people that run the Fort Wayne airport. They've been there a long time. They just took over their fixed-based operator. So if you're an airport, you can kick out private businesses after their leases run out, and do fueling and stuff exclusively, and you don't have to let other people in. But that is if you're directly the airport sponsor, which is usually a county or city or a local authority that's governing body, public body usually. So they do give kind of the local government the opportunity to be exclusive in their operating. So, like in this case, the aircraft was flying into Fort Wayne, crashed, and then everybody was kind of pointing fingers about how that happened. So this, we've heard this story multiple times over. Usually, especially back then, now with a lot of the technology that we have, to avoid things like terrain, probably wouldn't have seen this, or you see less and less of these type of incidents happening. Usually it's on aircraft that have less sophisticated systems, and around, this time in the 1990s, right, air carriers had the most advanced technology. We still saw incidents happening then, but as it starts to drive down to, like I said, ForeFlight, which I fly with now, that actually has an option in there for 3D flying, so you can see things like active terrain. So there's so many more technological advances that have over, economies of scale have driven it down to where more pilots can use them to try to avoid specific incidences like this, where you're flying in an unfamiliar area and you're, kind of going with the word of flight service, which is another change, right? Who now is calling flight service, right? You're following a flight plan through your electronic device and getting all that information yourself. So verification of altitudes, etc. So it's interesting. I just went through this the same. I was doing some of my own pilot training refreshments for winter flying. So, de-ice procedures. And there was one in there where a Cirrus took off out of Reno, and this was back in the 90s, and called flight service, or early 2000s. And it was reported that the icing wasn't basically as bad as it was. And they ended up freezing over at about 16,000 feet over the Sierra Nevada and plummeted. The parachute came out of the Cirrus, but it was over, I think, 122 knots or 142 knots. I forget the speed, but basically it ripped the parachute off the aircraft and crashed right into the ground. So we see this kind of pointing of fingers, but like I said, technology advances, and we've removed that and added more redundancies to allow pilots to have notifications in the cockpit, even with aircraft types like this. One point of interest that I thought here when we're telling the Reba McEntire story is right before this accident, Reba McEntire held open auditions for her backup singers. And the person who got the spot perished in this plane accident, but the runner-up to that position was Faith Hill. So, it's basically back to kind of everything's connected. I'm sure at that time that was probably something Faith Hill really wanted to have, but turns out that she wasn't a part of this accident. So she continued on with her music career. So interesting enough, bronchitis is what Reba McEntire had, which supposedly kept her off the aircraft, and then not getting this role kept a future country megastar from perishing in it by not receiving the role as a backup singer in Reba McEntire's band. Well, we're at about 33 minutes. It's getting dark here. It's getting late. I'm going to edit this. I'm going to throw it up. I'm going to go to bed. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody that celebrates that. I don't know what people do in Frankfurt, but if Germany, you probably do as well. I don't know. It seems like, that probably doesn't make sense, right? It's an American tradition. So if you're not doing anything this next week out past the United States, sorry that you don't get the days off. Maybe you do. Maybe you'll spend it with some loved ones. Maybe I'll drive down to Mississippi and try to find my roving family in an RV at some rest stop somewhere. But if you see me on the highway and you see me emptying the black tank at some rest stop, come up and say hi. I don't know how you'll know it's me, but we'll pick up. There'll be some vibes in there. We'll figure it out. Anyways, until next time, my friends, we will see you down the runway.